registered today but didn't get their badge yet. There are just a couple of people, I think, that didn't get their badges because we were out, but we got them now, and that applies to apparently no one in the room. So, disregard.
Sure. Okay. Whatever you want to do. Are we live or something? Like, what's with the countdown thing?
Yeah, I want to time it.
5, 4.
All right. Hey, welcome to Breaking Ajax Web Applications. We've got Alex Stamos and Zane Lack-00.avi that are going to be presenting for you here in a minute. And from what I understand, looks like Zane might actually be releasing some O'Day, or at least cheery O'Day, with some Mickey's beer left over from Dan's talk. So if you can fire off a really good question, I'll make him chug the Cheerios and beer, or Beerios, I guess. So line up your questions ahead of time, and he's already committed to doing this, so don't let him weasel out of this. But a big round of applause for both Alex and Zane for breaking Ajax web apps.
That picture is just a little demonstration of why Dave was a little messed up this morning. So, anyway, so like he said, my name's Alex Stamos, and we're what? Oh, okay, yeah, actually. And this is a little talk about Ajax web apps. We've got 74 slides in 50 minutes, so I'm going to be skipping over a ton of stuff. But I'm really, still happy to take your guys' questions, just not stupid questions. Let's try to keep them good because we don't have a lot of time. So we'll just do a really, really quick introduction about Ajax technologies. Talk about how Ajax changes web attacks. We'll talk about several web attacks that are very different in detail. And then Zane's going to go through some of the popular Ajax frameworks that are out there and some of the security issues that may exist with them, as well as what kind of protections you get from them if you build your app on top of them. Who are we? We work for a little company called ISEC Partners up in San Francisco. And why do you care about this talk? Well, it's pretty obvious to anybody who reads the news, even not just security news, that Web 2.0 apps are going through a little bit of a renaissance of vulnerability. MySpace, the fact that the term cross-site scripting worm is part of the security parlance now, that's kind of a big deal. It's a big change from 2-3 years ago when nobody really cared about web application vulnerabilities. And so today we're hoping you walk away with a basic understanding of Ajax, although we don't have really any time to give that to you. So hopefully you came in with that. Knowledge about how Ajax changed web attacks. We're going to talk about some in-depth knowledge for some very interesting attacks. And we want you to form your own opinion on whether or not you can trust an Ajax framework to do security for you. So we're not trying to load that question at all. I want you to form your own opinion based upon the talk. And I just wanted to throw out some special thanks to some of the other folks at ISEC Partners who've done some good work. Amit Klein and Jeremiah Grossman do some excellent work in the Ajax field and post on the Web App Sec mailing list, which is a very good place. And Rich Canyon's at Google, little shout out. Send us your resumes. Okay, so what is Ajax? Well, first we'll start with a different buzzword, Web 2.0. This is a totally overloaded term. Mostly because if you're up in Palo Alto and you go into Spago and you say, I have an idea for a Web 2.0 social networking site with videos and I'm going to have Indian developers, somebody will hit you in the head with $5 million of Series A, right? One of the venture capitalists sitting there. It is way overused, it is way overloaded, and it's really not a technological term, right? Web 2.0 is more of an attitude change. And some of those attitudes that are different than the web was in 1996, 97, are ideas like user-created content, or in the case of user-pirated content. The idea of social networking. Web applications have had users for a long time, but it's pretty new that applications understand the relationship between their users, right? They used to just have admins and high-rights users and then a ton of low-rights users and not really an understanding of how those users matched up with each other and no differentiation about how much access those users would have into each other's information. Usually it's nothing, right? On most web applications, you shouldn't know anything about the other users on the site. And so the networking is a pretty big change to a security model. The idea of highly interactive GUIs, this is where a lot of the kind of Web 2.0 flashy stuff is. This is mostly a phallus measuring contest between Google and Microsoft and Yahoo to whoever can have the most flashy interactive GUI, even if it doesn't actually help you use the app. It's mostly just for playing around. They don't make any money doing this, right? Google Maps doesn't make any money for Google. It just looks cool, and people think Google's cool because you can scroll around and use the middle wheel. right? But that actually is a very interesting technological issue. But one of the most interesting things is that Web 2.0 has built into it the idea of mashups and plugins. The idea that a web page no longer comes from a single source. It comes from tons of sources. Sources that you may not trust. Sources that aren't companies anymore, but 12-year-olds in basements. And that should be of concern, and that changes the security model a lot. So like I said, Web 2.0 really doesn't use a lot of new technology in a lot of places, right? If you look at MySpace, they're really technologically boring sites. YouTube uses a lot of Flash to play video stuff, which is nothing new. It's just they're kind of now at the cusp of the point where people have enough bandwidth to handle that video streaming down to Flash, but they don't really use any AJAX technologies. And MySpace is horrible, and I'll show you an example in a second, right? MySpace sends people huge freaking chunks of HTML whenever you load anything. There's nothing interesting or technologically advanced about MySpace. It's just a very different but there are people that are doing different things. And those are the companies that are truly using AJAX technologies. Things like Google Maps, MSN Virtual Earth, Flickr, any of those interactive sites that work asynchronously, that have lots of interesting stuff going on. Those are true AJAX sites. And so I'm going to use the term Web 2.0 and AJAX, mostly because I'm lazy. Although every time I need somebody to count how many times I say Web 2.0, because I have to send Tim O'Reilly $1 apparently every time I say it. But when I say those things, I mean sites that do this stuff. Sites that use client-side executables to do the presentation layer. That's a big difference, right? The presentation layer in a web app used to be created on the server and sent down just to be rendered. There's a big difference between the compositing happening and the rendering happening on the client side. The presentation layer is moved to the client side in an AJAX app. The pages that use less than full page reloads to change content, that use data formats other than HTML, that in detail, and that usually interact asynchronously with a server. So this is the kind of things that really are, you don't actually have to have JavaScript or XML to do asynchronous JavaScript and XML, but it's these kind of things that actually categorize something as being an AJAX app. So for an example of two totally different Web 2.0 applications, one of them is MySpace. Who here has a MySpace page? It's okay, you can say it. That doesn't mean you're a child molester automatically. You're just probably a child molester. That's it? Only 4 or 5 people? Yeah, MySpace is pretty crazy. Their entire business model is cross-site scripting, right? They're saying, we're going to give you script from somebody else and some ads, and that's their business model. When you look at this web page, what's interesting about it that's different than a web page you would have seen in 1997 is that all of this content, about 80% of this content, was not created by somebody working at myspace.com. It wasn't created by a contractor working in India. It was created by a man who wears a bear suit Saturday mornings. Actually, I think Oski's usually a woman because Oski's like 5'2", but it's a woman who wears a bear suit put this web page together, right? When you go to this page, you are looking at executable code put together by Oski the bear. And that's different, right? Because this is not oskithebear.com up here, this is myspace.com. This is running the myspace.com document.domain. It can access the myspace.com cookies. Code running on this can pretend to be you on myspace.com. That's a big difference in how the web was supposed to be made, right? The whole web security model, which doesn't actually exist, but if the web security model did exist, the basic premise is that when you get code from a site, you trust it, right? But MySpace lets you do all kinds of crazy crap on your MySpace page, right? You can have your little interactive photo sharing thing. You can have your ripped off MP3 that you stole that you want to play for all your emo friends so they can cut their wrists to the newest music. No, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff on MySpace. It's a supported part of it that requires you to have tons of executable content that can download. And if you look at a MySpace request, it's a big, ugly-ass URL and a huge chunk of HTML. This is about a 20th of the page that came down for the Oski site. There's no multiple reloads. There's not lots of different connections. There's not a lot of interactive JavaScript. This is Web 1.0 with a Web 2.0 business model. A very different model is Google Maps. You can see here is a screenshot in the middle of Google Maps loading. It loads up images as single tiles, and it does all this stuff asynchronously. Google Maps is really what you're looking at here. This is not a web page coming from a server. This is a web page put together by JavaScript running on your machine that happens to get data from a server, which is a big difference, right? The presentation layer here, what is putting all this data together, is running on your machine, running within the security model of Google.com, and actually in this case it comes from Google.com. And the requests are not one big get and a huge response. There's tons and tons and tons of little gets and little responses. What is this? This is the entire response for this GET request from Google. What is this here? It's not HTML, is it? Right? If you just sent this, if you just put this URL into IE, you would just see this stuff printed out as text, right? But it's not getting to IE that way. What is this code right here? It's JavaScript. And what's GAD copyright? It's not defined here. I don't see a GAD copyright function. Where is that? It's a method that's already been loaded into the browser. This is called a JavaScript callback. This is a very popular way of doing AJAX. This is an extraordinarily insecure way of doing AJAX. And we'll talk about a couple reasons why. It's not a big deal in Google Maps because they have no security model, right? Everybody can get all the information. There's no users. There's no logins, nothing like that. If you do this on a bank site, you're toast. Okay, so why do you guys care? Why care about Web 2.0 security? Isn't Web 2.0 just like stupid things teenagers do all day? Well, a kid, a teenager. Okay, see, these are the oldest people in the room. Everybody look around. Right. So you guys care, obviously, because your teenagers are doing this day in and day out. But why do other people care? Well, Web 2.0, like I said, it's an attitude change. It's a real change in how people interact with the technology. When I was in high school, which was not an incredibly long time ago, the fact that I hung out with all my friends online in IRC made me ineligible to date, right? That cut me off from half the population. If I was gay, it'd probably cut me off from that population too, right? It's just ineligible to date. That was not a cool thing to do when you're in high school. If you were 17, I've got like a 13-year-old cousin who goes to this hip junior high down in Orange County. I think they have their own reality show. Every one of her friends has a MySpace page. Every one of them, in their entire interaction online, she friended me, right? I have a MySpace page mostly for testing purposes. It's not for child molesting, just so I can put this talk together. She friended me so I could see all the stuff they talk about. I can't even read. It's not English. It's some kind of amalgam of English using the Latin character set. But I don't know what they talk about. But all of their friends are online, and all of their interaction happens online through MySpace and IM. That's a huge difference. If MySpace had a field that said, give us your parents' social security number and bank account numbers, kids would probably put the money in, that information in, to get a page, right? Because they have no fear. They have no fear of the fact that they are letting the news corporation, owned by Rupert Murdoch, know all about their friends and all of the things they're interested in and all the kind of stuff they like to buy and all of, and who dated who and who's going steady with who at Laguna Miguel Junior High School, right? They're giving all that information away and they have no idea of who has access to it, and they really don't care. Because to them, you put anything on the web, everybody can get it, and that's how the world works. They don't expect privacy. They don't expect any security controls. That's a big deal. Because in 10 years, my little cousins are going to have jobs, and they're going to have bank accounts, and they're going to be getting mortgages and buying cars. And the way they interact with the web is going to be affected by how they're interacting with it now. This is interesting because these technologies always spread from the innovators to the traditionalists. Companies go out, they get lots of venture capital, and they burn it, creating new uses for the technology, right? YouTube is probably not going to go out of business. They're going to get bought. If they don't get bought, they're going to go out of business because they're burning money like crazy. But if they are doing that to create a new way that people interact with the web, other people with money are going to come in and copy that. The thing is that the innovators never care about security, right? MySpace never cared about security until they're on the front page of USA Today as being a place that child molesters hang out. And they still don't really care about security. They care about child molesters, right? They don't care about security like we think about it. When these technologies are used by financial institutions, like some of our customers have, healthcare, government, the government's talking about having a standardized AJAX framework to use on all their websites. At that point, we care a little bit more than just a MySpace world. Obviously,